Description of this is Dataverse is an open source platform that's built to build data repositories for sharing and publishing research data, evolving the project's community focus from small social scientists to big data needs of research has led to features focused on computation, big data, storage, and replication. We have joining us today Gustavo Durand from Harvard University. He's the technical lead and architect for Dataverse and has been working with Dataverse since 2006, leading the overall architecture and technical design of the application, mentors, and provides code reviews for fellow developers, assists the Dataverse community to contribute features that are important to them, and works closely with the development project managers in leading this team and project. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Gustavo to tell us more about Dataverse.
Thanks. So you guys can see the slides, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So basically, I will be talking about the project. I'll give an overview, discuss some of its features, the technology we're built on. I'll then shift over, talk a little bit about our process and some of the benefits of how we're doing that, and then about some of the collaborations we've had. And I'll end discussing a little bit more about the community overall. So what Dataverse is an open source platform to publish, cite, and archive research data. It's built to support lots of different types of data and users and workflows. And in the next few slides, when I talk about the features, I'll divide up the features by those three categories. And obviously features might overlap, but I try to kind of place them in how they best fit within there. And so a couple of the benefits about the open source, and again, I'll also talk about this a little bit later, is the transparency we're able to have with the community, and then also the fact that we're able to collaborate, and it's not just all developed by us, but it's developed by the actual users, and there's a sense of ownership from within the community of the product itself. So we've been working on this since 2006 here at Harvard. Our funding comes partially from within Harvard and IQSS, and also we work on getting different grants and these different collaborations that help adding a lot of these features. We have a core team here that's about 15, which includes everybody from the UI, UX team and the designers to the management and technical lead like me, also all the developers obviously, and even our curation and metadata specialists. And then we also have, as we mentioned, a lot of contributions from the community itself. So the team expands and grows over time remotely with the community help. Okay, so as I said, data, users, and workflows. So some of the features we have to support different kinds of data. And one of the interesting parts of the fact of being open source and having this large community, but also one of the challenges is that we have lots of different types of institutions and organizations who want to use it. So they have lots of different variety of data. And so, one of the things that Dataverse does, it provides persistent IDs and URLs for all your data sets. But some organizations want to use DataCite for their persistent IDs. Some want to use handles. There's actually another group that wants to use something called DARA. So we have it built so that the ID, it's modular and you can add on different providers as needed. We also make sure we generate a citation for any data set and provide proper attribution. And we're compliant with FAIR principles and general data citation principles in the way we do the citations of data and have landing pages and our machine readable pages and things like that. We do offer domain-specific metadata. And by that, just what we mean is, while every data set has a core set of metadata that's needed for the citation, which the title, the author, you also want description and keywords and things to describe it, that the software itself allows installations to create and use different metadata blocks, is what we call them, to support different domains. So if you're in astronomy, there's a block that has specific fields that are built upon standards that have to do with astronomy. If you're in social science, we have a block that's for social science. And we work with domain experts and try to add more domain-specific metadata blocks as we can. And the system is built to be able to dynamically add them without needing a new release of the software. There's also versioning of data sets so that as you publish and create different versions, but cite an earlier one, that's still accessible to users. And our file storage, we're able to store the data either on a local file system, or we also, if you run on OpenStack, you can use Swift Object Store. And what we're doing actually now at Harvard is where you actually run it on Amazon and use S3 as our storage solution. So we also need to support different kinds of users. So with that, different institutions want different ways of logging in. We provide a native, username and password that you can create through a Dataverse application, but we also use Shibboleth to connect to a lot of the different universities. So I can log in, for example, with my Harvard key and not need a whole separate login. And we also do have OAuth, which we primarily added for ORCID, but with it, we also got, for basic, with just a little bit of extra work, a Google login and a GitHub login. And all that's configurable for each installation of Dataverse, so you can decide as an installation which of the sign-in options you want to include for yours. So while at Harvard, we allow any of those. There's Texas Digital Libraries, for example, only allows people who are associated with a Texas university that's part of their consortium, and so they only have the Shibboleth login, for example. Because the users can be different sized, you might have an individual researcher who has data that they want to put on a Dataverse, or you might have an institute, like for us, IQSS, you might have a journal. There's this ability to embed Dataverses within other Dataverses, and so you can basically manage the hierarchy of your organization with different Dataverses to be able to categorize the different data you have. With that, we also have branding, and we actually have branding both at the installation level. So Harvard Dataverse looks different than Texas Digital Library, looks different than ODM, looks different than Scholars Portal in Canada, et cetera, et cetera. But then each individual Dataverse within that installation can also have a little bit of branding that kind of says, yeah, this is my data as researcher, John Smith. And then we also have widgets so that you can take a view of Dataverse and actually embed that in your website. So if you have your personal website, and you can put a widget in of a listing of your data sets or of a specific data set on your website. So the other many variety of things that I've mentioned was workflows. We have lots of different workflows. We have a very robust permission system, which allows us to create all these different workflows. So for example, Harvard Dataverse, and I use that as my primary example because that's the one I'm most closely associated with. But we allow anybody to upload data and create Dataverses and data sets. And so anyone can do that. Another installation might say, you know what, we only want certain users to create Dataverses or create data sets. And this all has to do with the access controls in terms of use as well, because once you've uploaded data, you may have different permissions that you want for who can download the data and whether they can request access or not request access and things like that. The permissions also have the ability to have users and individually given permission, or also groups of users, which you can either have explicitly defined groups, or you can create groups based on your Shibboleth, like, we can create a group here that's all Harvard users, or you can create groups based on IP. There's different publishing workflows. So journals, for example, really care about the ability to have someone create their data sets and add them, but they don't want them to be published until they've had a chance to review them. And so they can manage that with the permissions to say only certain people are the ones who can publish, but anyone can add a data set. Whereas if I create my own individual researcher Dataverse, I want to be able to be in control of everything. So I can create and publish and do everything I need to with that data set. We also, for journals, have or developed it for journals, but it's for use for anybody, the idea of private URLs. So when a data set is in draft version, you can provide a private URL that with a token allows someone to anonymously go and look at the data set and therefore provide anonymous peer review. And we also have a bunch of different upload and download workflows. So you can upload files via the browser. We can also, if you have a Dropbox account, there's a button to say add from Dropbox, and you go and log into your Dropbox and transfer it that way. And one of the collaborations we've worked on, and we'll talk a little more about that when I get to the collaboration slide, is this for big data packages, we are now able to rsync data over and not use the browser and Dropbox because they have HTTP limitations on the size. And so when we use the rsync to be able to transfer these larger big data packages. And in general, one of the big things about Dataverse is interoperability. So we provide a lot of APIs. We provide SORD for deposit. It's a simple standard for being able to deposit stuff, but we have a very robust native API. Our goal is to try to make anything that you can do through the UI be doable through APIs as well. We're not quite there. We're maybe at 90% or something, but I can, instead of using the UI, I can use a search API to do a search, and then I can download all via API. I can also upload and publish via APIs. We've used that a lot with journals where they have publishing for the papers, and then they can automatically, through the APIs, deposit their data into Dataverse at the same time, doing it as one operation instead of having to go to multiple sites to do all the work they need to do. And we also provide harvesting, which allows different Dataverses and/or other services to get the metadata or give their metadata back and forth. And so, for example, at Harvard Dataverse, we set it up to harvest all the metadata from all the other Dataverses as they come to be, so that you can go to Harvard Dataverse and search for everything. We don't grab their data, so when you find something interesting and you click on the link, it'll send you straight over to their installation, and then they're able to manage their permissions that way. So being the tech lead, I always have a quick slide about the technology. I'll go quickly over it, but if there's any questions afterwards, but we're a Java web app, so we run on Glassfish. We use Java Standard Edition 8 and the Enterprise Edition 7. We use a lot of different modules for all the presentation, business, and storage layers. In the back end, we store things in a Postgres database. We use Solr for indexing and search. And as I had mentioned before, you can store files either in the file system, Swift or S3. I mentioned our transparency, and that's one of the nice things about the open sourceness. So we have our development process is this. All our issues are in GitHub. We also use this called Waffle, which shows issues as they transition during a sprint. And so these are, when something comes in, it comes in the inbox. When we start looking at it, we move it to backlog, and then we work in 2-week sprints. So every 2 weeks, we have a meeting to decide what we're going to work on for this sprint. We put things in there. They get moved over by developers as they work on them. When developers are finished, they move them into code review. I or one of the other developers or one of the other developers reviews it. It then goes through a QA process, and then when it gets through, it gets to done. These 2 links, we don't have time to go through them, but the first shows our roadmap and recent and upcoming releases, and the second is a link to that waffle board. So you would see this, and this image shows it all closed up, but if you go to it and you click on the double arrows, it'll open up and you'll see the specific issues in each of those different parts of the process. I mentioned the collaborations that we have, and so the 2 in bold are the ones that are more interesting, I think, to you guys. And so with SB Grid, which is structural biology grid data, we worked on adding this rsync support to be able to get large data in and out of Dataverse, and to be able to, we're working with them to be able to replicate it across different places, so that if you are working in France and we can replicate it to a server there, you can do your computation work there and it's closer, and you might have access to that environment, but not to some other environment. We've also worked with the Massachusetts Open Cloud. That's how we got the Swift storage. We worked with them to get the Swift storage enabled, and through Swift to be able to allow compute access to your data. And the other collaborations are ones that we often talk about in these presentations. I don't think they're necessarily super relevant, but in general, they're interesting for different reasons. The first one for handle support, that was one of the persistent identifiers. We actually worked with a couple different organizations, and it was managing the work that Don's first started, but then Simit finished up, and so that we could then merge into the core. Research Space was all about creating a Java API client for the API library for client library, for the APIs to be able to use the APIs through Java. And we've been working with the Provenance group to get Provenance, and are working on that actually this current sprint. We're trying to finish on some of the stuff relating to that. So our community, I mentioned that we have many different installations. So we work on the software here at IQSS, and we also run one of the installations, the Harvard University installation, in collaboration with the libraries. But the software is downloadable and able to be installed anywhere. And so we currently have 32 different installations around the world. That's what these big dots are on the map. And those are ones that are in production and are willing to be on the map, but there's a lot of others that are also testing it out, and our community continues to grow that way. And because we have all these different installations and everyone's interested in different features, we've had over 50 different people contribute to code, and we have hundreds of members in the community, which include these developers, but also includes researchers, librarians, and data scientists. We meet with them regularly. We have a Dataverse Google group so that we can have email threads and communication. And it's great to see, because when that first started, most of the time people would ask questions and the responses would generally come from us. But as our community continues to grow, before we're even able to get to it, especially if it's like from Europe and late off hours, responses come from other members of the community, and you can see the community itself growing and sharing with each other knowledge. We have a community call every 2 weeks. And so if you're at all interested, that's going to be not next Tuesday, but the week after. But every 2 weeks we do a community call. And then we have an annual community meeting that we host here in Harvard, where people come in and we have presentations about what people are working on in the group and what we're working on. And we present the roadmap coming up and to have discussions and lunch and things like that. Here's a picture of our community from for the last community meeting, excuse me. And I think that's what I've got. Our next community meeting is June 13th, 14th, and 15th. So if you're interested and want to join us, let us know. If you have other questions, obviously feel free to ask now, but we're always available through the support and or these other channels.
Very nice. Thank you very much. So I'll turn it over for questions around the horn. If not, I've got one going, so I'll go ahead and toss this out. So it's now Gaffney. I'm one of the co-Is on a project called the Wholetail, where what we're doing is try to bundle data with the sort of containerized applications and environments that produce those for reproducibility. One of the challenges that we're going to be facing fairly soon with this is how to bundle and put these into repositories. And so, have you had any experience with bundling both application and data into a searchable, discoverable environment for sort of both aspects of that, or is there anybody else in the Dataverse who's sort of looking into that?
Yeah, we are definitely looking into that. I mean, for Dataverse itself, you can upload any files, and so you're definitely encouraged to not just upload your data, but also upload the software and code that you use to get the results that you've been getting. In particular, we have had talk with, I don't know if you've heard of a group called CodeOcean. They're a for-profit company, but they work on this idea of bundling the software and data together and then providing, I think they call it I'm trying to think. They don't call it a container. They call it a compute module, I think. But the basic idea is to take it together and run it for reproducibility. And so we have proposals with them to get a grant so we can work with them. And the one thing we want to make sure is that we're not developing specific to them, but to that kind of product, so that if there's an open source one that someone has, then we can connect with that as well. But we definitely want to create that idea of being able to, reproducibility is very important within the data world and within Dataverse itself. So we're working with those groups.
Absolutely, and I just was going to say, I mean, it's sort of twofold. It's both reproducibility from the point of view of being able to redo it, but also being able to discover how people did what they did. And that's a different aspect of search, which we're sort of challenged right now a bit to how to define. So I think, it might be good for in the future. We're very, very close tracking CodeOcean as well, and understand what they're doing. I think we've actually have some conversations with them on things. So I think it might be good in the near future to start to come up with some, maybe even some everybody will have a standard, but proto standards that we can have for some of these environments, so that we can have transparency even between the environments.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Hi, this is Rene Bastone. I'm the executive director of the Northeast Big Data Hub. Gustavo, a quick question for you. Dataverse, is it primarily used in academic data sharing applications, or are you guys doing applications that move beyond just the academic domain?
I'd say it's beyond the academic domain. I mean, it is definitely about research and academic research in that sense, but it's not just for universities. A lot of the different installations are like, for example, the Netherlands has one for their national social science organization called DAWNS. There's a few other organizations that have to do with like agricultural studies and things like that across Mexico and France and the rest of the world that aren't necessarily university based. It is definitely academic research for the most part. We have also talked with some other groups, like Red Hat is interested in possibly using Dataverse for some of their internal kind of processing of data, which is obviously very different than what we're used to in the academic world. So our goal is to produce it as a platform that could be for anything. Obviously, we come from an academic environment, so a lot of the easier user feedback that we can get and have access to is more of that, but we definitely are welcome and interested in being more broad if we can.
Well, I would love to. We're working on a number of things that span outside of academia. It's really at the intersection of academia, government agencies, for-profit companies, et cetera. And I'm a firm believer in not reinventing the wheel. So I would love to, and particularly easy since you guys are in the Northeast, I'd love to come up and maybe talk a little bit more about how this might be applied to some of the things that we're thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. Get in touch with us, either me directly or through any of those links. And or the project manager or some of the other people, but we can set up a meeting and figure something out.
Sounds great. Thank you.